Not true.
True about fake news, not true about us.
I remember hearing about it when it actually was about fake news, back during the campaign when it was about people in Macedonia making up stories and putting them on the internet. And I guess it shows sort of how far into my bubble of other news reporters I am that I didn't really think it was going to be a big deal. I couldn't imagine anybody sharing that sort of stuff that seemed so obviously wrong. And I was wrong.
Resignation, I think. Whenever, I think that's sort of the nature of the culture in the internet now, that politicians in particular, but also media outlets just always attack, never defend. Any criticism, the only reflex is to throw it back at the critic.
Well, since that was directed at me, it was a little surreal to absorb that in that moment. My first reaction was that the president-elect was trying to dodge the question. This was his way of trying to put the pressure back on us, as opposed to just answering what is a legitimate question. And so, my first reaction when I heard fake news was, let's go.
From my dad. Don't get too high on the highs, don't get too low on the lows.
We are not the story, also from my dad. As we sit here, maybe that's not compelling, but we're not the story.
I had a news director, again back in local television, who would say, don't say it, show it. That was always a good piece of advice. It taught me how to write to video, how to write to television stories, so that way it just didn't sound like a newspaper on television.
The First 48, a show on A&E where the detectives solve crimes. It's like wish fulfillment for journalists in that, like, in the beginning, they're like us, they have all these clues, they don't know what it all means, but then A, they don't do the show until they solve the crime, and B, they have subpoena power and they can force people to talk to them and search their houses for clues. It's like seeing sort of a fantasy version of your job where they have much more power to answer questions than we do, so that's it.
I don't know, I guess I should say Westworld. It's the last one I remember.
We were just talking about this. Stranger Things. I finally, after the campaign was over, I was able to binge watch a show. This was the show that people were talking about. What's funny about the whole Stranger Things phenomenon is that now people refer to the world we're living in now as the upside down. So it is kind of funny that that's a theme in that show, and it does feel like sometimes we're living in the upside down world.
I'd say it's still the economics of the news business. A lot of places that cover a lot of really vital parts of the national government, but also state and local governments, those news outlets are really struggling.
Lack of trust in what we do among a broad section of voters.
Questions of credibility.
I think for us, the challenge is to try to figure out kind of what are the new rules going to be and how do you persuade people to trust you, not because you've been doing it forever, but because you're transparent with them and direct with them and speak very directly to your audience and feel that you're accountable to them, not to your sources, not to some kind of institutional establishment.
An obstacle to journalism these days would be the leader of the free world right now. If he is going to describe news organizations as the enemies of the people, then I guess I would consider the president to be the biggest obstacle that we're dealing with right now, yes.